We are a consulting firm, and we really aim to work with clients to find a project management solution that fits what you need. So we focus on blending people, process, and technology, and working with those who need our help on all of those areas. We also do a lot around software implementation for project management and data analytics, and we've got a few of our software partners listed down here. I'm excited to say that we are an official Microsoft partner now. That's fairly recent. I was very involved in that. So I was excited to add that to our slide down here that we're a Microsoft partner. So welcome, everyone. A little bit about me specifically. I am a solution consultant with Echo. I've been with the group since 2022. I live here in Vermont, like a lot of our folks, but we're not all here. We've got some people in other places, and we work with clients in different organizations nationally and internationally as well. Most of my experience is in project management and software implementations. I've done work in Smartsheet, Power BI, Monday, Teams, and many more. I do really like to get into analysis where I can, but we realize that just analyzing data doesn't always get you there. You've got to consider the people aspects of project management and a lot of other good stuff like that. But I'm excited today to be able to focus on the data pieces of things. So very quick rules, please feel free. This is not going to be super formal or anything like that. If you have a question or want to speak up or just interject, feel free to just, turn your microphone off and say something. If you'd rather type it into the chat, that's fine too. Someone else is going to be keeping an eye on the chat, and they'll grab me if I need to, address a question. If we have time at the end, I'll try to leave some time at the end for questions. And of course, you can always follow up with us afterwards if there's something you'd like to hear more about. All right, and we are going to be digging into project management data. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about what it is, talking about what we can do with it or what we would like to do with it in our ideal scenarios. Some of our lessons learned from Echo for best practices for managing project management data. And then I will show you a little bit both in Smartsheet and in Power BI about some of the options you have for leveraging your data. If we have time at the end, we can talk a little bit about the challenges associated with data, the things people might be facing when they're thinking about trying to dig more into their data. So our first question, kind of taking this 30,000-foot view, from project management, I tend to really think about people and communications and projects and these other aspects. But if we step back a little bit, there is a lot of things about project management that is based around data, based around the information that you know and how you get it and how it's organized. Some of the areas that I thought of just for project management data were task and activity tracking within an individual project. You often collect this in your project schedule or your project plan, or even just checklists, depending on how you're doing it. Tracking the things that don't fit in your normal project tasks, the risks you might have identified, changes that are happening. And at Echo, we like to summarize all this under CRAID. You might have also heard RAID logs, but we call it CRAID for changes, risks, action items, issues, and decisions. But essentially anything that's not going to fit in your normal project schedule. We know this stuff comes up in every project inevitably, so you need a way that you're tracking that as well. We also have our project metadata or vitals. These are going to be the things that, kind of apply to the whole project. You're not capturing in the project schedule necessarily, but what type of project is this? How big is it? What's the current state? Is it a red, yellow, green health? Is it on budget or off budget? Like sort of those overall pieces of information you need about a project. And then we've also got, sort of expanding out a little bit, the information you need about people related to a project. Certainly your resourcing, people on your project team who's doing the project, but also your stakeholders, who else is interested in this project, who might be sponsoring this project, who might have told you that it's a critical priority for the executives to know about. All of those people related, and how you get a hold of those people, how you let those people know about your project. That's a set of data about people that you have to track for projects. You've also got information or data about governance and process. This is often a separate set of documents or something that you're referencing for how projects are supposed to happen at your organization, any processes that you need to follow. And sometimes this is just in someone's head as well. This is an area that there's often some work to do to develop or mature an organization to make sure this kind of information is standardized. And then we start getting into even more sometimes technical or detailed. What are all the documents related to your project? What are the files that need to be collected? Where are they stored? Who has access to them? How do other people get access to them if they need to be shared? All that kind of thing. Part of why I've broken it out this way is just to show, there's a lot of data that relates to projects. And within these categories, these are often all in different places. Your task information versus your metadata versus your governance may be stored in a different place. It may be in a completely different format. It may be owned by different people in your organization. But for project managers, you need to figure out a way to bring this information together in order to actually learn some things about your projects. I'll just open up real quickly. Are there any other major sources of data that folks think of? You can speak up or put it in the chat of data that's important to be tracking for projects. I know that Molly's already put some in the chat, so I'll take a look at that. So methodology, workflow, change management process, document and knowledge management, auditing, which Molly mentioned is information you're going to need to know.
The interactions, right? So the communications associated, whether they're emails, whether they're chats, whether they're channel posts and all those other things. Oh, Kristen just mentioned it as well. So that communication plan.
Communication plan, yep.
All those little mini side conversations and how that information gets back into some place that can be viewable by those that need the information.
Excellent.
Great call out, Kristen.
So we've got all this data. Let's talk a little bit now about what we actually want from it. Like, what do we want to do with this data in theory? I think of it almost like a pyramid or a ladder. At a very basic level, we just want to be tracking our project data, like know what's happening within a project. What's the date things are due? I have worked at places that this was the only piece of information we really cared about was the due date. Like, were we getting it done by the date so that we can bill the client at the right time? I highlight this just because sometimes organizations haven't gotten a good foundation even at this level. They don't have a real consistent source or set of expectations about how all this data is maintained. And it's very difficult to move into useful analytics when you don't have a consistent, well-managed tracking system for where it all is. If you are making progress there, you do move into being the next level of being able to understand the current state of your projects. And again, I've worked with clients that can't answer the question, how many active projects do you have? How many projects are high priority? How many projects do you have that are ending in the next quarter? Because they may be lacking some data pieces or they don't have a good analytical view, it's difficult for them to get that information quickly. So our goal for this level is to make that kind of information just very easily surfaced and easy to find, just to understand the current state of your projects. We then move into, when we've got a decent understanding of these pieces, we can start actually looking ahead to mitigate risks and managing change. And this is where, really the bread and butter of project management is. That's a whole lot of a project manager's job, is these two pieces. The even more fun part is we continue building on this to do analytics of your past data so that you can understand patterns and lessons learned, being able to make forecasts into the future based on these lessons, and even do things like analyze performance, actually plan and schedule farther ahead, more than just a week or a month ahead, being able to really plan out where you want your projects to go and how you're going to resource them and all that good stuff. And I would put, there's obviously different pieces to all of this, but at the top, I would really put, the golden ticket thing you're trying to do is align with the strategic objectives. And what I mean by that is, put a star there because we like that one a lot. Moving into actually tracking KPIs, like our set KPIs for individuals and teams and an organization as a whole, and be able to tell if your projects are successfully supporting those goals. That is not easy, and it's partly because it takes so many of these other pieces kind of lining up in order for you to do that. But ultimately, this is kind of the promise of having a good foundation of data is that you'll be able to really drive forward your successful projects, will help drive your objectives forward for your organization as a whole.
There's a cool trend, Caroline, just going back one moment, that I love, which is this movement towards value management. We have so many clients that ask us about, tracking the value that a PMO or that a project management organization or methodology brings their organization. And they're looking for like, hey, what KPIs can we use to really express that value? But I really like this change in some of the conversation in the space towards value management, and that alignment with strategic objectives, and really making sure that the work that the organization is investing in is aligned with their long-term vision, and the management of that. So whether it's quality driving it, whether it's like the value, the return on investment, that alignment with those strategic objectives really being that driver, instead of more of that police cop kind of feel, which is like, just making sure people are doing something, rather making sure people are doing the right things for the right reasons.
Absolutely. So for the rest of the time, these are all really great conversations as you move up the ladder. And we have some other resources on our YouTube channel. We've got some other things that we have rolled out that work on these. But for today, since this is really supposed to be focusing on project management data, we're going to come back down to this bottom level. If you're really at the point of you're tracking data perhaps, and you want to move into more effective understanding the current state of your data and actually mitigating risks and changes, how can you start doing that with tools like Smartsheet and Power BI? We have some best practices that we have found to be just really important, and we tend to be a little bit of a broken record repeating these with the clients that we work with. One is making sure as you're moving into looking at your within your projects and across your projects, that you have a single source of truth as the central data source for your data. That it's not just getting email updates from folks, it's not in somebody's head, it's not just verbal updates at status meetings, but you have something like a central project list, a central group of project assets that are considered the single source of truth. That's partly for version control, so that you know what's actually the most updated, but also so that you're not having to make updates in multiple places. It is not ideal. You don't want to ask your people to be having to update or take a look at data in more than one place. It also makes things like analytics much easier, that you're grabbing your whatever you're showing is coming from the correct and most authoritative data source. Whatever data you're collecting at the project about your projects, those need to be clearly defined, whatever those fields are. Some of them are fairly straightforward, like the name of the project, the type of the project, if you have that established. But there may be confusion sometimes as priority level. If your organization gives things a priority, does everybody know what those priority levels mean? If you're giving a project health rating, could be something like stoplight, red, yellow, green. Does everybody know what it means when a project is green versus yellow versus red? You need to have clear expectations for how the data is updated. You can build on things you might already be doing. If you have weekly status meetings, you can set the expectation that everyone updates their project information the day before that weekly status meeting, for example. A lot of the software that we work with has a way to make that automated as well, that you send out an automated message once a week or once every couple of weeks to make sure that the right things are updated. Also, not just how it's updated, but who is updating it, who is the owner for that project that should be the one providing the update. You need to be managing the permissions and access rules so that the right people are seeing and able to edit the right things. You often will have the case that a project team should be able to update some pieces, but they should not be able to update the high-level financial information for a project. Or you have people that need to see the reporting on data. They do need to see the overall metrics, but they should not be editing the actual task level data on a project. So having a clear sense of who's the correct audience for your data that you're putting out, and how much what level of permissions do they have for interacting with that data. And then finally, and this is the fun part, it's creating deliverables that allow for easy, consumption of data or interaction with data through reports, metrics, visuals, and dashboards. There are lots of tools that do this in some way. We really like Smartsheet and Power BI. They're good examples of kind of the two levels. Smartsheet offers a lot of really good initial visualizations and summaries of data when you're starting to work with your project level data. And then Power BI really gives an expanded set of capabilities as you start to bring in more complex data and need a little bit more as far as things like filtering and access controls. So I'm going to jump into Smartsheet first to show a quick example of a lot of these best practices that we've talked about. Well, let me take a look while I'm doing that. If anyone,
it's all my comments. You can just ignore
okay.
me. I'll ping you if something comes up.
Okay. All right. So coming out to Smartsheet, this is a good example of what we would call a project list or a project intake list. This is all dummy data, except I did use the real names of many of my nice colleagues. So we'll pick on them a little bit as we go through this. You can see some of our principles here. We, as far as having data fields that everybody knows what they are, knows what they mean. I might actually add, Smartsheet has a nice functionality here on priority to add a column description. I would like to fill this out as, you know, something gets a priority of 1 critical is a business critical project. And once I've done that in Smartsheet, if I hover over my information icon, I can see that information for the column. So that's one way to make it just very clear what the definition actually is of that column as your people are being asked to update it. I've got some health columns here as well. And for our purposes, these are going to be manual red, yellow, green that the project manager is giving, how they would rate the scope, schedule, budget, and client satisfaction for their project. And then there's a calculation here of the overall project health. Schedule and budget are often health indicators that could be calculated based on a formula. If you're comparing dates for your schedule or have budget calculations that you're making. But we usually find that scope and something like client satisfaction usually still remains like a manual rating of red, yellow, green. I, for this demo, have set the expectation with my project managers that they update this once a week. So assuming that that's happened, I do have nice, fresh, updated data here. And see if there's anything else to, okay. So main things. So I have taken all of this into, we're going to start with a pretty straightforward project status dashboard. And this shows sort of the 3 major categories of visuals that you work with generally, but within Smartsheet, well, we've got metrics that are showing overall summary numbers. These charts here are giving you that visual summary based on the information underneath, and then a report that's giving you a more detailed table view of the information related to projects. Just taking a look at this, I already remember I mentioned like the person that wasn't even able to say very quickly how many active projects they had without going and checking with someone else or emailing someone else. I've been able to do a very easy calculation here to get my overall summary numbers for how many active projects I have going right now, how many are starting in the next 30 days, ending in the next 30 days. And then I've also got a category of not signed projects, because that's something I want to pay attention to, projects that we assume will be starting soon, but have not been signed yet to go forward. My tables, I've got here a projects by priority, so I can see those that are critical, high, medium, and low, phase, and then also my projects by lead. And then finally here at the bottom, I've got a report view of projects that I'm calling at risk that are filtered by health of red and yellow. So already I've got a pretty good sense of my current state in some regards. One thing I notice is I've got some assignees here that have a heavier load, that have 7 or 6 projects assigned to them, while others like Jason Lachelle, I have only 1. And so I might want to consider taking more of a look at that and rebalancing a little bit just based on this visual. Looking at my metrics, it's interesting to me that I've got a project ending, 5 projects ending in the next 30 days, but none starting. Whatever that means for me internally, I want to take a look at, maybe follow up with the people that I know are working on those projects that are ending soon, and making sure we're mitigating any risks that might come up around projects closing. And then for not signed projects, that's probably something I want to get the update on too, from my business side of, if something, as we're getting closer to the time we would expect these to be signed, if that hasn't happened, why that may not have happened. Similarly, with this at-risk project report, I've got a little more detail here. I can see the individual breakout of the health, but I can take a look with the project manager, perhaps I'm using this dashboard in a meeting, about why the rating is red for a project or yellow, and what we should be doing to follow up on that in particular. Sorry, let me take a breath just for a second. The other piece to notice here, which is nice about Smartsheet dashboards, it's just a new capability, so I kind of like to show it. This was a pretty basic out of the box coloring scheme. They have added dashboard themes, so you can, change the colors there as well. So if you didn't like my, basic colors, I don't always spend as much time adjusting all the colors, but you now have those options in Smartsheet to change the theme in that way. As I'm looking at this, one thing is like, for someone who's never known how many active projects they have, it's great to have that number, but this might not actually be all that helpful. I would actually rather be able to see quickly how many at-risk projects I have, so I know what I want to do right away. And I should say, for context, this is really thinking of this view as a pretty tactical view. Someone who's managing a department or a program that needs to understand what's going on in the group of projects that they are managing pretty quickly. And I'm not even making this a very long dashboard that you have to scroll. I want to be able to see just right at the top exactly what's going on and what actions I should take. What's actionable from this? When I leave this dashboard, what am I going to go do? I know I want to follow up with at-risk projects, so I'd actually rather feature that number a little higher, so that I know if I'm really starting to tip over into a lot of at-risk projects. Let me quickly change this then. I've made some metrics. And if you haven't used like dashboards and metric sheet and Smartsheet before, we often use a supporting metric sheet. We've got some good videos about that as well. I won't get into all the mechanics of it, but I have calculated the number of projects that I have that are each health and added up the reds and yellows to get my at-risk project number. I'm just going to edit this active projects one, make the formatting match a little bit. So now I've got a widget that's showing what I have that's actually at risk, and you can keep kind of adjusting the actual look of that metrics widget. So for me, this is a little more useful. The first thing I see is how many projects I have that qualify as at risk. Another thing that I might like to add is a report showing I've got my projects by priority just broken out by level. I'd like to feature them in a report that shows which ones I have that are actually critical and high. So you can copy and paste in Smartsheet dashboards, which is nice. I'm going to bring that down so that I have the same formatting, but change the report so that I'm showing now my critical and high projects, and make sure I change the widget title to show that as well. So I'll pause there for a second, but this is a quick run through of bringing in a project list to give you a nice dashboard view of the current state of your project. You're not going super deep on any of this analytically yet, but you've got a much better view of the current state of the projects that you have. If you want to look at starting to add a little bit more to your data, there's a lot of ways you could do that with the data you have. You can start adding more dimensions. That's actually a Microsoft word for adding more columns to your data. As you start to gather a little more data consistently, you can add more fields. You can start thinking about what data you want to track over time. Like if there's other data you want to start adding, not just how my project manager rates the project health today, but how did they rate the project health last week? How did they rate the project health a month ago? How can I start tracking that month to month and start seeing those kinds of changes that are interesting? You can think about adding additional data sources. In that case, we were just working off of one project list, but as we showed that initial slide, there's lots of data sources, and you start thinking about how to bring in some of those other data sources in a useful way. And then, as we've sort of touched on, you have to be thinking about the audiences for your data. So you need to start thinking out, how do you actually share this? Are these things that you share in a PDF format? Do you want a URL link to a dashboard that's a published dashboard that people can interact with? That kind of thing. But those are all additional opportunities for building on a fairly, sort of a foundational project dashboard, moving that from just something that's tactical into something that's going to give you more analytical possibilities. So I want to look at the same data set in Power BI with this idea of what other analysis can we do? Just looking at the data set again, just to show you what else we have in here. Same group. I noticed that I do have a column that has the project estimate of hours that we estimate are going to be spent on this project. And we've got some other things like the actual dates, the target start and finish date of the projects, and the work, this would be the actual start and end date, the work start date and the work end date. So just working with these additional pieces of information, as well as the clients, I'm going to open up Power BI and start working on a dashboard that's going to be a little more analytical, with the idea of I want to understand not just how many projects I have, but how many hours we estimate are going to be spent on those projects, and who are the clients that are related to those projects, which clients have signed up for more hours, essentially. I already connected this sheet, but in order to bring data into Power BI, you've got this Get Data button. And a really nice thing about Power BI is you can bring in data from lots and lots and lots of sources. They have lots of connectors, and the connector with Smartsheet works really well. So I've already done that. I've got the same table we were looking at. I'll show you in the data view, or what they call the table view. Here's that same data set. And I made an overall metric widget. It's actually similar to that overall metric widget that you saw in Smartsheet, with the total estimated hours. I did apply some filters. I didn't really talk. You can do this on the Smartsheet side too, through reports, but in Power BI, you can do it from the same view of the report you're building. I'm filtering these projects by their status. So I'm only looking at projects that are not canceled or complete. So current projects. And that's something I can see right here in the filter pane on Power BI. Let's see, and this is actually for the whole page. So everything that I'm showing here visually is going to be active projects, not ones that are completed or canceled. And then for this bar chart, I did a pretty simple, I think this is called a bar chart versus a column chart. So this is just showing of my clients, how many estimated hours are they signed up for in our current projects. Great. Now I'm going to start adding a few other things. And as you add visuals in Power BI, they will be connected to each other, which is really nice. It makes it more interactive. I decided to add on an additional visual of the estimated hours by consultant. So now I've got how they're divided up under clients and how they're divided up under consultant. And I can see this supports what I saw before. Lisa and Kelly were the two that had a lot of extra projects. They do still have the most hours. But a cool feature here at Power BI is that these visuals will now interact with each other. So if I click on ISDM, it's going to adjust my other visuals to only show ISDM hours. So 510 total hours, and then how it's divvied up among the consultants based on their hours. I would like to add another component of type of project, which was another column on my sheet. I kind of glossed over it a little bit, but I've got 4 types of projects that we tend to do. This is just the pie chart of the proportion, how many projects fall under each type. And this is one way that I could show it. I've just got a pie chart. Great. However, I might want to actually compare that to clients, like of my clients, what types of projects are they buying? So I'm going to take that same column that I was showing in the pie chart, the project type, and just drag and drop it onto my client bar chart. And now I've got a nice stacked bar chart. For my same client ISDM, I can see the project type that they have here across the top, along with the hours associated with it. And I can filter the same way, just with pieces of this bar chart. So now ISDM's implementation hours, I can see Kiefer and Barbara working on them. If I hold down my control button on my keyboard, I can select any of these pieces and get the adjusted visuals for total estimated and hours by consultant. To get rid of all that, I just click into the white space on the chart. So you can already see you're getting a lot more analytical possibilities. And these are interactions that a user can do when they're looking at a published dashboard as well. We're looking at the report view, like the report builder view. But these interactions are possible from a published dashboard for someone that doesn't have access to this kind of Power BI view.
Can I just take a moment, Caroline,
Yes.
and just, so we just went pretty technical for a moment, which was awesome. And it really highlights kind of the reason why Echo would, move to a more robust dashboarding system. But I do want to just kind of take us back a second and think about the value proposition here. So when Caroline was showing you all of the different integrations, that was really important because as project management organizations, as Caroline mentioned really well in the beginning, we typically have many different data sources. So from your sales team, right, from a pipeline of potential projects that might be coming in, from your strategic leadership team, from your finance, from procurement, from all these different places, invoicing, your vendors, your document systems, and all these different things. By using a system like Power BI or another system integrator like this, you can bring those data sources together, marry them, massage them. So Caroline, we're not going to go super deep into Power BI. Caroline's starting to put some great videos together on this, but it really gives us that opportunity to bring those different data sources together and really focus on who needs this information. One of the biggest things we see is people get a tool like this and they get really excited and being like, wow, look at all these cool visuals. And they end up with what I call a rainbow or unicorn puking on it, in case you needed a visual. But really it is bringing us back to what is that super important information and what is that person going to do with it? And then for Echo, one of our things, Caroline, and you and our consultants are amazing at this, is just like really recognizing where people are at. So for some people, it really is just getting all of their projects in a single list. And for other people, it is really digging in on forecasting, approvals of hours and things like that. So I don't want us to get lost in like how cool this, and Caroline's going to show us some more tricks and tools, and it's really going to get you being like, wow, imagine if I had this data, which is awesome. But I do want to just make sure we have that value proposition. So we're bringing in all these different data sources, and we're starting to think about how a specific user would need it. So one person might just need to know, hey, these are the list of the projects that are coming up with training in the next couple of months. And another person needs to know each project that this person is assigned to. So anyway, sorry, Caroline, I just wanted to bring us back around because this is awesome. And it's not just the tool, it's really the use case behind the tool and the people and what they can actually do with it to make their lives a lot easier and not be in a situation where they're exporting and massaging Excel in 20 different documents and then not having dynamic data. All right, back to you, Caroline.
Yeah, that's a great segue actually, because another use case I had thought of is for these clients, you often are getting information about the clients from somewhere else. Like a common interaction is sales wanting to integrate all their data they have about clients and prospective clients with project data. Like, let's see, but you haven't really brought that data together in an effective way before. So a simple example would be sales. You're the program manager, the department manager, you're talking with sales, and they want to send over the information they have about these clients that they're working with because they want to know how much work are we doing in each region or state, you know, which will give us something to think about as we're setting our sales goals for the next quarter. So of course they send it to you in just an Excel file. They're not Smartsheet users or whatever it is. The nice thing in Power BI, Excel interacts very well with, I mean, these all interact well, but it's one of the foundational ones that is easy to work with in Power BI. So they send you just a list of client addresses. So I bring that in. When I click on it, I can see what this list looks like of my clients with their address and the state. I'm going to choose transform data because it looks like the column names didn't quite get brought in, and this will show you the view. This is called Power Query, and it's the place you can really do a lot of cool stuff with transforming your data and bringing different data tables together and getting it into the format that you need. You can check your data quality if things are missing or that you need to replace values that have come in incorrectly. But in this case, all we need to do is this one, use the first row as the header. So now I've got a nice table, client, address, and state. And honestly, this happened because I forgot to change it to a table in Excel. This is something you can also do in Excel before you import it if you know Excel well, but I can correct my error here in Power BI. I say close and apply. Now I've got a nice client address table right here with my, we'll take a look at it in the data view with my client address and state. The next thing I need to do is come to this model view. I need to make sure this is actually a separate table, that it's correctly related back to, and sorry, this is getting in a little bit in the weeds on the data part, but it is, I just want to show the possibilities because it is cool. I've got my client column here. I want to make sure this is correctly related to my client column from my original project list. So I'm going to drag client over here. Power BI will automatically detect the relationship it thinks those things should have. We could have a whole nother webinar about data tables and relationships and how you set this up in a tool like Power BI. But now I have these client columns related together. And when I come back to my report view, what that enables me to do is actually, let's do it this way. Make another, so another way that you can filter data is called a, oops, sorry, go back. I'm going to make a new tool called a slicer. And since I have client addresses and state, I can drag state over here and I now can filter my data with a checkbox. I want to see which data is for Illinois or Maryland or New Hampshire. Using my control button, I can actually do, okay, let's see the New England states. Now I can see for New Hampshire and Vermont, which clients I have, the number of hours, and how many hours the consultants are actually putting in for those states. So this is one relatively, I mean, this would take a lot of manual work in some other places, but with Power BI, you can bring it in as a separate table when you have that request or that separate data source that you're trying to bring in to relate back to your project data. Okay, the final thing I wanted to show, and then I'll try to leave a little bit of time if anyone has questions. Oh, we do if you start working with slicers in Power BI, something that will save you and your audience a lot of grief is to insert a button that says clear all slicers, so that you can always come back to the present state of your data without having to worry about who clicked a filter somewhere on your screen. So just a quick tip, just insert a clear all slicers button. It's a prefab button that's already on there. The final type of slicer, which I think is cool, I'm going to take off this date one rather than a state slicer. You can also put a date range in as a slicer. So if I want to take a look at, and not that one, let's see, finished date. Maybe not. Let me look at if I related this correctly in my model view. No, I did. Let's see. So I'm trying to show the relationship of the, okay. Let me just pivot off of that because I don't want to take up too much time with that. It is possible to also filter by a date range, which can be really helpful. Again, as you're starting to fill out data and you're starting to enter things over time and get a bigger data set that way. coming back to our, this kind of diagram of what we want out of our data. We work with a lot of folks, as Molly alluded to, that are really kind of here at the bottom, that are trying to actually start tracking their project and portfolio data in a consistent way, and then move to the understanding and mitigating risks. As you move through this, these kinds of tools like Smartsheet and Power BI can really, really help cut down on they can help with engagement. They can help on really increasing your efficiency around these things and give you some actual operational actionable insights into your data. But since we often end up starting with just getting the data in better shape, this was the last piece I was interested in hearing people from. So hearing from people about. The challenges of data, there's a lot of promise in data, but the challenges of data are many within organizations. It's often in different locations. It's often inconsistent, missing or incomplete, or in different formats. It's often overly difficult or manual to track and manage. Sometimes it's a whole person's job to gather the data about projects in order to report about it. It can be difficult to understand and draw conclusions from. And then data security can be difficult to manage. Any other challenges anyone wants to mention, since we're talking about how great it can be to analyze data, but we know there are challenges too?
I think it was funny when Jason came into the meeting and was saying, like, this is about the AI, right? Like, there's so much there that we're excited about the potential of AI and how it will transform project management as an organization. But when it comes down to it, having that buy-in of the project team and the project managers to have consistent data so that you can have historic data for potential AI models down the road, and just the ability for people to provide those updates in a single place instead of 5 to 10 places, let alone really making sure that you're providing the right views to the right stakeholders. So whether those are kind of your leadership, executive stakeholders, versus your project team members versus potential external, whether those are clients or your vendors or, again, different team suppliers, but like who has access to that data. I would definitely say that buy-in to providing consistent updates and that common lingo, and it is organization specific about what a net risk project is, what an active project is, what it means, and the culture associated with escalating risks and things like that. There's a lot to that first layer that Caroline's talking about. And then obviously we love the technical piece as well. Like, it's a lot of fun from the system integration standpoint and everything else for us, but it really is understanding, right? So making sure that people trust that the data is updated and can validate that, and kind of that adoption and buy-in pieces of it. So I love this, Caroline. I mean, you and I love to nerd out on this, so this was fantastic. But project data and how project data is managed, I would say, is a huge challenge for a lot of organizations and a lot of project managers, because project managers end up in a role of an admin instead of really being able to use their judgment.
Kristen said sustainability and talent for building dashboards can be challenging, and that we definitely see that. The out-of-the-box tools can be helpful, but what I found with building dashboards is it's also tempting to just try to put everything in a view. It's hard to know what's the most important. Like, what does my CIO actually need to see versus my program manager versus my actual team members. It's always a balance between the really detailed versions of things with super long tables versus trying to do really pretty visuals and making the format appealing and all of that. There's definitely a lot that goes into it for dashboards. But that also makes it fun, and we'll, I'm sure, do an adjusting as a PMO matures. Yep.
It's true. Absolutely.
Yep.
Adjusting as the PMO matures, making sure that you understand your stakeholders and what they actually need. We oftentimes just talk about the top 3 right? So what are the top 3 things? And you can do it from a couple of different things, right? You can go into a dashboard and say, hey, what are the top 3 things that we want them to actually do with this information? Is this really just an informative, just being like, this is just basic information, or are you expecting people to do something with the information and take action, and understanding if the primary focus is information, just like, presenting it out there, versus action. And then when it is action, when you think about time savings and really getting your return on providing this data, maintaining this data, and showing this data, is thinking about like that time savings. And so obviously updating things in 5 or 10 different places is the most obvious use case for project managers and program managers and PMO leaders. But even just thinking about going like a step even deeper, which is like, what are those 3 questions that I get asked over and over and over again? Right? And solving for it. You don't have to immediately go to a detailed dashboard, but just being like, hey, what are those questions that I get asked over and over again? Or what are those misses that we keep getting ourselves into? So there's lots of different things. There's consolidation of data sources. So dashboarding is just one way of doing it. Again, we love the technical implementation side of things, but getting to that point of data consistency and standardization has huge benefits in the short term as well as the longer term. Great job, Caroline. I love this.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, thanks so much to everyone who was able to attend. Please reach out if you'd like to discuss more. If there's another topic related to this that you would like to have a webinar on or think would be beneficial, please let us know that too. I'm sure I'll be doing a few more of these data-focused things, dashboarding-focused things, especially as we roll out our more of our Microsoft side of things and start really expanding on our solutions for those tools. So thanks very much, everyone. Hope you have a great day. Appreciate you being here.